Great, thank you, Ruth. So, well, that's a hard act to follow. That was a great session. Thank you to both of the speakers. And so welcome to the second plenary session of our day, the decline of single-use disposable foodware and reusable foodware systems. And we have three incredible panelists who are going to share with us their work in this sector. And if you were online and able to see the first plenary with Lindsay Hall's presentation, then you're primed for this deeper dive into reusable foodware in the food service sector. So I'm Krista Tornay. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an associate with Zero Waste USA and one of the conference coordinators. And I'm a Berkeley, California-based zero waste consultant, advocate, and chair of the city's Zero Waste Commission. I'm honored to do this work on and for the lands of the Ohlone people and their ancestors. And as we have in the other sessions, we'll have some brief Q&A at the end. It's helpful to put in the chat if you're to preface your question with a Q and an A and who you might be directing it to, because the chat's getting quite full of comments and crosstalk, which is welcome. So I want to set the stage for this weighty topic by offering a few sobering figures from a report issued this year by Upstream Solutions. Nearly 1 trillion disposable food service products are used each year in the United States. That's about 9 million tons, or equivalent to the weight of 25 Empire State Buildings. An estimated $6 billion is spent by businesses and city governments on solid waste management costs attributed to disposable food packaging. Roughly 20 billion pieces of litter are from disposable food service packaging. So on the bright side, each of our speakers are working diligently to hasten the decline of these resource wasting single-use items. Starting us off with a global overview will be Dr. Dagny Tucker. Dr. Tucker uses her expertise in design and systems thinking to tackle the social and the environmental issues behind the linear cycle of production and consumption. As the founder of Vessel, one of the world's first tech-enabled open network reusable service system, VesselWorks, a nonprofit consulting firm focused on circular design, and the design studio Thread Count Creative, Dagny is committed to using design and systems thinking to innovate actionable solutions to some of the world's most pressing issues. She consults with governments, industry, businesses, and communities around the world to guide design and assist in the implementation of reuse systems. She recently returned from speaking at this year's TED Countdown Summit, which was held in conjunction at COP26, the recent climate change conference that was in Scotland, and she presented on the impact of plastic. Next, Scott Morrison will cover the effects of the pandemic on reusable foodware systems. Scott's the co-founder of Dream Zero, a Toronto-based reusables rental service for events, also offering consultancy to source reusable containers and plan reuse programs. Dream Zero represents Muse in Canada, a global app-based reuse platform that helps members access and implement reusable foodware packaging and systems. He's a true advisor, ex-ZWA board member, which is the Zero Waste International Alliance, and the founding executive director of Zero Waste Canada. Lastly, Crystal Dreisbach will focus on some successful local strategies to implement both policies and systems that serve to meet zero waste and circular economy goals. Crystal is the executive director of Don't Waste Durham, a nonprofit organization in North Carolina, whose programs include the foodware reuse system Green to Go and the recirculation project, sorry, Crystal, and the driver of local policy and change. Crystal was recently awarded the Reuse Activist of the Year at Upstream Solutions 2021 National Reuse Awards. Bravo. And so to start us off, Dagny, would you please share your screen? Welcome, Dagny.
Thank you so
much.
And
panelists.
I am so happy to be here, and I just want to applaud the phenomenal session that preceded us. It's really incredible, and I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the things Yvette spoke to. But overall, I'm happy to talk today a little bit about what's happening with reuse, particularly reuse service systems that have emerged. And of course, you know, reuse isn't something that's new to us. We have a long history of reuse. We all know the milkman, and we still have reusable bottles that are in service in many parts of the world and very effective from both an economic and environmental standpoint. But what happened, obviously, with plastics emerging, the convenience, their clarity, diversity, ability to do so many different things with them. Obviously, we entered a situation which a wonderful organization in India has comically highlighted here for us, where we have a significant issue with our waste. And that's not something I need to go into with this group. But what does that really mean? It means that we're really in a situation where our production and consumption patterns are creating, as Yvette so stringently outlined, a form of what's called structural violence. My PhD is actually in international peace and conflict, and I really came to the zero waste space whilst looking at the impacts of how we are producing things, how we are consuming them, and what happened with them afterwards. And in peace and conflicts, we define violence as a physical form of violence, but there's also structural violence. And those are the societal structures that are around that create the operating norms we exist within. And that was very clearly illustrated by Yvette's excellent presentation earlier. And so I was really interested in the cultural side. Culture is essentially the everyday norms that form our everyday experiences and activities. And culture, you know, as represented by this image, has literally become a single-use culture. And I say that not only in terms of the materials that we use and dispose of regularly after single use, but that it spills over into our value sets as well, and how we dispose of people, how we harm people, how we see pretty much everything as becoming disposable. So I think looking at the cultural side that underpins these actions of how we use products, make products, dispose of products is incredibly important. And
can I interrupt you 1 second? I know you're on a roll. Were you going to share your slides?
Oh, can you not see the slides?
No.
Oh my gosh, I've been presenting. Thank you so much. Without that,
You've been doing a great job. I thought you were winging it the whole time. So thank you.
I would love to share my slides. And I will go back to the first one and just give you a quick view of the slides as we have them. You can see them now, I assume.
Yes.
Great. So, you know, here's this little overview of what's been happening in terms of past reuse. And this is this comedic slide of this wonderful organization, Wasteless in India. And here's our look at sort of structural violence in this cycle that we're deeply embedded in at this point of consumption, production, and obviously landfill at the center of that. And culture as well. And then we get to what's happening. And so when I was really getting interested in how do we begin to shift cultural norms, I began to understand that really the best places to activate behavior changes are in places where you have an ingrained everyday behavior and something that's highly visible, because our best way to shift behavior, not only with one individual, but then broader society, is through what's called social proofing, the visibility of a change by someone. And so for me, that culture slide that you saw ever so briefly was about the fact that single-use disposable items, and in particular, the single-use cup, is highly visible, and our caffeine habit is extremely in bed. And so people are going out and getting disposable cups, and they go everywhere. They're on the street, offices, people take them home, etc. And so I think other people began seeing this problem, at least from a waste perspective, if not from sort of the behavior change cultural shift. And we started to see sort of reusable service systems looking to address this problem begin to emerge. And GoBox was one of the first. It is now run by an incredibly talented woman, Jocelyn Gowdy, and they're in Portland, Oregon. The company I founded, Vessel, launched in 2015. In 2016, we saw a couple of others in Europe begin to emerge. Muse launched in 2018 in Bali initially. They're now in Singapore and Hong Kong, possibly back in the US soon. And then we'll talk to Crystal later, who began Green to Go in 2017. And in these early years, you know, there were just a few of us out there and thinking about how can we do something better than just use this item for 20 minutes to then allow it to pollute for hundreds of years afterwards, and all the health effects, et cetera, that go along with that. When Vessel launched in New York City in 2015, you know, we really didn't know, there was nobody doing something like this. We were told we are ludicrous, we are crazy. It was a real experiment at that point. We didn't know if businesses would want something like this. We didn't know if users would use it. We didn't know if people would return it. And the logistics, people say, oh, you just run a reusable cup program. That sounds cool and easy. But as Lindsay alluded to a little bit in her talk earlier, you know, it's a reverse logistics and a forward logistics. It's washing. There's so many complexities to it. What we were after when we really launched was, can we see a behavior change through this? And so we tech enabled early on, not realizing the value of that from an efficiencies perspective, but recognizing that if you can give an individual feedback immediately in the moment about the positive impact they're having through their behavior change, then the likelihood that that person is going to adopt that behavior in the long term is increased exponentially. And we saw that result. And really, that's what inspired us to move forward. Over 68% of people responded, of our users responded, saying they had begun to reconsider every one of their daily single-use disposables habits after using Vessel for 3 weeks. And that was the biggest win to us. So we really believe that beyond addressing waste, what these systems are also doing in a very visible way is beginning to address the disposable culture problem, really highlighting that alternatives are possible, and not only are they possible, they're elegant, they're beautiful. But at that time, there was a little bit of an issue with cash flow. I would say for most of the early startups in this space, you know, investors, even donors were really suspect that this would actually become something. So I would say there was a couple of years where people were really scrambling to get money. Businesses were interested, but having the capital flow to get things going was a little bit challenging. In 2017, I think in my perspective, there was a huge shift when the reality of the problem of ocean plastics emerged. National Geographic ran this issue, and we saw an incredible uptake in the conversation and the interest around addressing single-use disposables. One of the pivotal shifts in this space was when requests for proposals were launched in the city of Berkeley. And this was a response, and also the idea preceded the ability for Berkeley to pass pretty extraordinary legislation around SUDs. And that had a huge impact in the space. And for us as a business at that time, and others, I think having a government, or at least the Ecology Center, ran this request for proposal for funding for a reuse system to come to Berkeley. It really helped to establish that this market was real and was going to be expanding, and allowed us to get more support through investment and other arenas. Now in 2021, this is what we're seeing. There is an incredible exponential growth in reuse services. There is an organization out there that's developed what's called the reuse landscape. I have a link for it, I think, in the next slide. And they are showing that in every category, from reusables, foodware, to zero waste grocery, and to packaging, everything else you can think of, we're starting to really see this market explode. And despite the pandemic, different types of solutions are emerging. We have a lot of advocacy that's been there, but we really have seen the growth in reusable service systems for foodware, as well as zero waste markets. What types of packaging are we looking at? There's primary packaging, which is what holds the actual product, secondary packaging, which the product gets boxed in to get transported or distributed, and then there's transport packaging. And all of these categories, we're seeing the emergence of reusable services around the world. Here's an example of a few of the different delivery and takeout foodware that's out there. Supplies in Canada, GoBox I spoke to, and Muse as well. These are some of the zero waste groceries, and interestingly, vending. So we're starting to see a vending model emerge where we're going to have reusable containers and vending, whether those are in corporate campuses, universities, or elsewhere. One of the backbone really of what's going on and the ability for reuse to grow is sort of the washing and logistics. So there's a lot of different companies approaching it in a lot of different ways. As Dispatch said, they really position themselves as a reverse logistics company. Some companies like DishJoy in the Bay Area are handling the washing side. So there's a lot of different components. There's tech companies that are coming out now to support with the asset tracking as well. And so it really is a very broad ecosystem. It goes beyond just your reusable container to everything in the background that needs to happen to make these services work. Everyone works in a little bit different way. And I think that this space is still figuring itself out. There are questions to be asked around economies of scale and pricing, which Lindsay spoke to. Do we charge the consumer? If you charge the consumer, is that equitable? Do we charge the businesses, where the businesses then offset, a cost that they've already been paying for single-use disposables? It's not a price parity in service situations. It can be if they just wash in-house and replace in-house goods, but we're still seeing a lot of different approaches to how to get reuse out the door and how to make it viable economically. Algramo is a company that started in Chile. They have projects with Nestle. They provide sort of refill models for dog food and washing detergents, and they have refill stations. Club Zero was originally Cup Club. They're in London, and they operate similarly, where you check out from the service provider. There's a return bin. They collect, they wash, they redistribute. This is a great slide by Upstream that represents the reality of what we can do in this space. The one call out I'll make is on the $5 billion saved by food service businesses. I would say that is the case, again, as I said, if you're replacing a disposable in your business and you're keeping it in-house. But we really have some scale questions and price parity questions that we need to address for the service model still. But the opportunity is immense, not only to eliminate the single-use disposables, but it has a huge impact on the production side, the fossil fuel side, all the externalities, both social and environmentally, particularly landing in frontline communities. So the big question is, how can you support reuse? If you're a business, what's the low-hanging fruit? Can you transition immediately? Are there opportunities to go to your local government? Many, many governments in the US and around the world have zero waste teams now. They're looking at this problem. They're creating subsidies and opportunities to support businesses in this transition. Look at all of those different components of your business and see if there's somebody out there that can support you in beginning to make the transition. Government and civic society, I really encourage governments who are looking, local government, et cetera, to reach out and get advice early on how to think about whether it's a pilot. Really, we're looking at reuse infrastructure. And there's a lot of work being done on the meta. Are we going to standardize reuse? Are we going to really think about it like the infrastructure we currently have and provide for society? Can there be multi-vendor return stations where Dispatch and Muse and Green to Go can all have a return bin and shared infrastructure on the back end to really make scaling and efficiencies affordable? There are a lot of big picture topics to cover, but government has a huge role to play, particularly in looking at policy, EPRs, all of the things that will nudge business and support business to make an economic case. And individuals, go out there and use the services that are around, even if they're not perfect yet. These services need the support of everyone who's interested in this space. It is incredibly important that even if it doesn't work perfectly, you give that feedback, you help these companies along. I recently spoke to someone who launched a zero waste grocery, and someone was doing a film on zero waste, lived near their grocery and had never yet been. I just haven't quite gotten a chance to get over there. If you have a service near you, sign up and use it, even if it's outside your normal everyday methods. We need individuals to do that. Support the policy that comes your way as well. These are elements. collective action doesn't happen without individuals. So we need everyone to participate to continue this incredible momentum that the reuse space has. Around the world, in different categories, in different arenas, the reuse revolution has arrived. It's going to continue to grow. It needs support from every category, from individual to policy, government, and business. And we're so excited for all of you to be here at this conference and to take part in reuse in whatever way you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dagny. That was great. We have to kind of keep moving on really fast now because we have only about 20 minutes or so left. So anyway, Scott, take it away, please. And please share your.
Thank you very much, Dagny. Amazing as always.
Thank you, Dagny.
All right, let me just get to my screen here and present. Zoom pops up a whole bunch of fun stuff. Whoops, wrong button. All right, here we go.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, says loading. I'll wait till, here we go. Okay, yeah, first of all, honored to be participating and contribute to this massive knowledge share that is the National Zero Waste Conference. A great company, great presentation so far. So my presentation is about reusables at this time. When I say post-pandemic, I am referring to the post restrictions and lockdown phase of the outbreak of COVID-19. Now, the transformation of the food service industry from disposable to reusable packaging has been happening for a long time, as Dagny just recently outlined. And I argue that COVID has shown the resiliency of reuse systems. And we are much, much better for it, all of these lessons that we've learned during this time. Obviously, our total use may have dropped significantly during this time. We were, for example, my company Dream Zero in Toronto, we provide reusables to events. We were scheduled to be serving about 750,000 cups in the summer of 2020, and we only ended up serving collectively about 100. So give you an idea of the scale of drop that we experienced at that time. But there's been a lot of lessons during this time, and it gives us great confidence in reuse systems and that they will grow and adapt into the future. Also, we learned a lot about the weaknesses of single-use supply chains as well. So today I'm going to be going over a few of the lessons that we've learned, including the safety of reuse systems, the assurance of local supply and shared supply chains within reuse systems, and of course, how we communicate effectively about the safety and efficacy of reuse systems. So first, I'll start with health and safety. During this time, our reuse systems were reevaluated based on the concerns of COVID-19 specifically, which does not spread via surface transmission. Nevertheless, we must take precautions according to public health guidelines and recommendations, and of course, consumer feedback. So what we did was we evaluated and identified and resolved potential contamination points throughout our system. Generally speaking, it's easy to describe a reuse system as you wash and the consumer borrows, and then the consumer returns or receives the order, then the consumer returns, and then it's washed again. Very simple way to look at it, and it's true, but what COVID did was it really put us under a microscope where we learned that, here we go, there's obviously many, many more steps to process. Items, sorry, got lost in my notes there. So as you can see here, for example, it's not as simple as just washing and borrowing and then returning and that cycle repeating. There are a number of steps along the way that we must make sure that safety precautions are in place and that we're meeting regulatory requirements throughout the complete journey of each of the products. Now, when you look at potential contamination points throughout the whole system, there's obviously quite a bit. And we dove into this with all the cafes that are participating in the Muse system within Toronto. And we really got down to the nitty-gritty of all the potential points of contamination and all the procedures that are necessary to prevent that. So for example, even just between washing and drying, you have a number of potential concerns of contamination. So for example, is the attendant, did they wash or sterilize their hands? Are they using gloves that were washed? Are they using the same gloves that were used for collecting the cup? Obviously, we can't do that because there's potential for contamination there. Are they using a clean towel to dry the surface? Are they putting it on a sanitary surface after it's been washed? All of these things, we must make sure that they're streamlined and that we've got policies and procedures to back them up. So in the end here, we're feeling pretty good because we realize that our systems are quite robust. Public health has been a great ally of ours in Toronto. We work very closely with Toronto Public Health, and they have used us as a case study numerous times to the restaurant industry about how to use reusables at this time. And yeah, we're very, very excited about that success. One of the other things that we learned during this time was, of course, supply chain issues of single-use versus reusables. There's a lot of uncertainty within the global supply chains and not so much on the reuse front. And I'll get into a little bit more about that. So if we were to take a look at one single-use coffee cup, of course, there's all of these various stages from extracting and shipping and processing and more shipping and so on. The topic of LCAs continues to come up when we talk about reusables, and overwhelmingly shipping and processing and extraction seems to be where the most amount of energy and carbon is created during those phases. Now, when we look at 20 coffee cups, of course, this whole process is multiplied, and the effects right now of COVID tend to slow down the movement of goods significantly, as we've seen throughout the globe. This has caused single-use coffee cups, for example, their price went up about 50% here in Toronto. We've seen this with other products as well. And basically what COVID has done is it's compounded the slowdown at each stage, and has caused, now we're waiting for an order of reuse containers from overseas for now an additional 2 weeks. And that seems to be norm. But once it gets here, of course, things move a little bit faster. So of course, we have the same sort of supply chain as what single use does up until the point that it gets here, in which we use it multiple times. Now, what we do is, with Muse, for example, because it's scanned out each time, we can see how many rotations the actual vessel has. In Toronto, since February when we launched, we have had some cups go over 40 times, which is really exciting for us. There's a lot less interruptions in a local supply chain like this that re-loops the goods quickly. It's very efficient, and we're not as susceptible to all the global supply chain issues of single use. Now, we've seen this with other goods that are reused frequently. So for example, bike share programs, their prices haven't gone up. Their supply hasn't been a problem because they're here and they're in rotation here. Same thing with reusable shipping boxes. Dagny referred to them as secondary reuse boxes. So basically, these are already here, they're already in rotation, and the prices haven't gone up due to supply chain issues. So we feel very good about that. Another thing that that we've learned over this time is, of course, communication with stakeholders. So when we speak to our stakeholders, and of course we've got various stakeholders that we communicated with during this time to make sure that everyone was feeling comfortable with how our system was working. Public health regulators, as I said, vendors, of course, so these would be the cafes, and then consumers, especially. So with consumers, initially we were getting a lot of very positive feedback. You know, oh, it's so great that you've come up with a system to prevent garbage, and you know, oh, we love it just the way it is. It's fantastic. And then as we launched and we got some press, we very quickly learned that there's another group of consumers out there who didn't quite understand the safety of reuse programs. So we had run into, if you look at this article and the over 400 comments that we got, we ran into a lot of comments about, you know, how can you do this during a pandemic? And there was a lot of misinformation out there. And then we also were shown how the average consumer responds to that too, and how they make the automatic connection to how when you go into a restaurant, you use forks and spoons and cups and it's all the same, and they've all been washed, and we feel confident with that system. And so what we learned through this sort of case study here with a lot of consumer feedback, we learned very quickly what people's concerns are and how they talk about it and how they talk about the solutions. And so we found that to be extremely helpful at that time. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying that, yeah, during this time, we've felt that we've learned so much in such a condensed time, even though the traffic may have been a little lower than what we were hoping for. We do feel that the lessons learned during this time will help to propel us into the future, and we're really excited about that. So with that, I think I'll pass it over to Crystal.
And I'll say really quickly, we've had such incredible information coming at us so far. We're not going to take the time for questions. So I'm going to invite the panelists to go ahead and answer questions that you can in the chat. Crystal, not you, because you'll be speaking. And we have until 10:15. And we are running 5 minutes late in the schedule, but we have concurrence then. So Crystal, take it away. And Scott and Dagny will try to work on the questions that are coming in. All right. Thank you, Scott. That was information packed. Crystal, you're muted. There you go.
Thanks a bunch, Chris. Thank you to Dagny and Scott. We were doing an advocacy video about how reuse is classy, and I think both of you make reuse classy. You know, why do we want to drink our coffee or our water out of trash, right? So I'm here to talk about, you know, really a systemic level for this across a whole city. I lead an organization, nonprofit called Don't Waste Durham. And for the past 8 years, we've been working on policy and lots of innovations that people and businesses can use right now while we wait for government to catch up and do the right thing. One of them was Green to Go, which is a reusable takeout container service, which we launched in 2017. I noticed a few kind of basic questions in the chat about how this could work, so I will go over this just really briefly. We have an app that people can download for their phone and subscribe to become a Green to Go member. We stock clean, reusable, durable containers at our participating locations, so they sit on the shelf. just like any other to-go container. When a customer comes, request green to go, or they can do so online. And their food comes in a reusable instead of a disposable. They take it home and enjoy it. And when they're ready, they can return it to any return station in town. We have about 40 of these across the city, which are locatable through the app. And then our green to go rider team picks them up on 3 different routes with bicycles and trailers, transports them to our central wash facility where they're washed, sanitized, dried, and then redistributed back to the participating location. So we've been operating now for 4.5 years. And although it's still not perfect, we're always iterating, we have learned a great deal. And so we are helping other cities start their own and not having to reinvent the wheel. So we help them with the blueprint, our best practices, the lessons we've learned, and our tools, so they don't have to create those from scratch. We're now taking all of that knowledge from operating green to go, and we are taking durable, reusable packaging to the next level. And that's what I want to talk about today. So as Dagny and Scott pointed out, there's technology, there's infrastructure, there's supply chain that reuse needs. And those things are different than the technology, infrastructure, and supply chain for trash. So these are things that all of us across the globe inventing these reuse systems are creating. In 2019, Don't Waste Durham launched a project called the Recirculation Project. And it was actually featured just this past Sunday on NPR National. You can Google that with the word recirculation. I think it's pretty cool. Hope you'll check it out. We started this project to test a really disruptive hypothesis and build slowly over time a proof of concept. Basically, could reusable packaging of all kinds, not just food and takeout and drink, but also products, be collected curbside, just like trash and recycling? And could it use the existing infrastructure of the recycling industry so we can help the recycling industry adapt and evolve beyond recycling, but also to become a redistribution center of the reusable packaging that is recovered? So pilot number 1 was in 2019. This was the very first test of logistical feasibility. So we partnered with the city of Durham and a corporation called Sunoco Recycling, and we RFID tagged a number of types of durable packaging. And we commingled them inside the blue curbside recycling bins along one Durham route. And we followed those containers' journey all the way to where they entered the hopper at the recycling facility. And we were able to recover 97% of the packaging off the line using RFID scanning technology. So this was a very small first step in testing this hypothesis. The next year in 2020, we had another pilot to continue this proof of concept. Is this financially feasible? Is there a value chain for durable materials recovery and redistribution? So we used a lot of local company packaging, as you can see here in the picture. And we also calculated it for larger corporations like Amazon. If Amazon were to invest in reusable shipping containers that could be used a certain number of times, they ship those to consumers, consumers put those in the recycling bin. Would Amazon pay a recycling corporation to redistribute those back to them? And would that be enough money for Sunoco, for example, to want to do that? What if we retained the value of materials by circulating for reuse instead of smashing down those materials, baling them, and then selling them to foreign buyers? So Duke University completed a value chain analysis for us, which showed the durable material value all along the chain. And the result was that companies were willing to pay to get their materials back, and at a high enough amount to create a desirable, stable revenue source for a struggling recycling industry. So pilot number 3 is next and will launch early next year. The goal is to test our hypothesis that we can build the volume required for the financial feasibility from our 280,000 population city, and we will measure economic and environmental outcomes, excuse me. We're finalizing the study plan now, and we're going to be measuring some of the following outcomes. So before I go on, as you can see, this is a very busy slide, so I'll just go through it very briefly. This will include technology to track assets. Essentially, residential customers will get a list, probably on paper to begin with, but then will be in the e-wallet as phase 2. They will get a list of all of the local companies that sell products, producers of all kinds, and they can purchase these products. And when they do, they can put the packaging into a receptacle on their porch, and they will get points for everything they put in, and they will have the recycling reuse insurance that those will be collected, washed, and sold back to the producers. So there's supply chain logistics involved in infrastructure. Our MRF will be in this pilot number 3 for collection, sorting, wash, and redistribution. So these are the outcomes. Reuse takes labor and it creates jobs. So with additional opportunity incentives to buy local, we're building wealth in the community. Money stays in the city instead of leaving to large multinational corporations. We've proven that we can retain the value of durable packaging when we circulate it locally. A key example is glass, which my city of Durham and many other cities do not recycle. Local producers do not have to buy virgin packaging from overseas, instead rely on very low cost, affordable, community-owned packaging, as we're calling it. Of course, there are environmental and human health outcomes as well. When people are shopping locally, we're reducing our consumption footprint, meaning fewer fossil fuels and less waste disposal necessary. So our vision and plan is to continue to build the infrastructure of our MRF, citywide wash facility technology, pickup, wash, and delivery. The recirculation project takes advantage of some key opportunities, and we're excited to take what began as a reusable takeout container service to the next level. The next level is for durable, reusable packaging to not just be an alternative that's available to some, but a ubiquitous citywide norm. And meanwhile, we're going to continue to work on building the foundation for circularity in our city, which we believe include these supportive elements. And we're going to, especially, I want to emphasize this, that we're going to show the very big role that local government has to play. We are assisting and helping them meet their sustainability goals, their carbon emission goals, their waste goals. And we will continue helping our City of Durham Solid Waste Management Department to evolve. So in partnership with them, we're working on getting a reuse component. So they're not just doing recycling and trash, but also reuse becomes a part of our city infrastructure. Thank you.
I will be back on the main stage on time, and that'll clear that up.
You're on mute.
Sure. Hopefully Jessica will be here.
Chris.
Chris, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute because I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Sorry, I said we don't have time for the Q&A, but what I'm trying to do is put everyone's links to their business in the chat, as well as the email.
Obviously, not everybody can watch the concurrence, so.
It sounds like someone isn't muted, just so you know. So I just put those off. I put those in the chat, and you should have the email addresses and the website addresses for these amazing speakers. I thank you very, very much. A lot to digest, a lot of work to be done. And I want to say, after reading the chat, that I do stand behind the fact that these aren't perfect systems, but But everyone I know that's in this sector continues to try and figure out all the different aspects of social justice, environmental justice, consumer change, materials, on and on and on. It is a very, very, very complex puzzle. And I applaud anyone that's trying to get into this, because it's even more difficult now with COVID and the supply chain issues. So bravo, keep at it. And as everyone should be a patron of these systems. We just have to support them. So thank you all, and head off to the concurrence. Ruth's been putting the links in the chat so you can see where to go next. And here we go. So thanks so much.